All right, hello, fifth grade. Today we're going to continue doing lesson 2 of chapter 11, and we are going to focus on the second and third page of our packet, which is talking about loyalists and patriots. Mainly, what was their occupation, what did they do for their side, and what were their arguments for or against independence. So we're going to start with the loyalist, and our first loyalist is Thomas Hutchinson. He was a loyalist governor. So Thomas Hutchinson was a loyalist who lived in Massachusetts. The king named him the royal governor of Massachusetts in 1771. So that's his occupation, right? He was named a governor of Massachusetts in 1771. He was a dedicated official, but over time, Hutchinson became one of the most hated men in the colonies because he always sided with the British against the Patriots. Hutchinson was a thin, serious man who rarely smiled. He did not like to show his feelings, although, a successful businessman, he did not wear fancy clothes. As an official serving the king, Hutchinson firmly believed in enforcing British laws, such as the Stamp Act of 1765. So, right there, action taken. He was always sided with the British against Patriots. That could be his action taken. And he enforced all British laws. So that's the action that he was taking. So now we're going to find his arguments against independence. One night, an angry mob burst into Hutchinson's house. The mob stole his possessions and broke furniture. They also destroyed his prized collection of books. From then on, Hutchinson was a bitter enemy of the Patriots. As a loyalist, Hutchinson believed that the colonists could not govern themselves without the British king and government to guide them. All right, so that's his first argument against. That's our first argument against independence. Hutchinson also wrote that the British people who lived overseas, such as the colonists, could not expect to have the same freedoms that British people in Great Britain enjoyed. So he believed the colonists don't deserve the same freedoms as British people do in Great Britain. In 1774, some patriots embarrassed Hutchinson by printing some letters that he had written to the British government. These letters said that the Great Britain should be tougher on the colonists. When colonists read his letters in the newspaper, many more of them turned against him. They became convinced that getting fair treatment for the colonies from Great Britain was not possible. All right, so let's go through our paper and we're going to do our occupation, action taken, and the arguments against independence. All right, Jonathan Booker was a British religious leader, and he used his sermons to spread loyalist beliefs. So that's his occupation. Booker first came to the colonies as a young man in 1759 before returning to Great Britain. While back in his home country, Booker became a priest in the Church of England before eventually moving to the colonies once more. There he became a well-known religious leader in Maryland. Booker was balding and usually wore spectacles or glasses. He was also very intelligent and charming. Booker was full of energy and ambition and did not shy away from talking in front of large groups. Booker was never afraid to speak his mind, no matter how many people disagreed with him. As a minister, he expected everybody to obey his teachings. He used his talents and his occupation to argue for the Loyalist cause. Booker preached that the king's power came from God and that Christians had a special duty to obey British laws. Disobeying the king was like disobeying God. So that's his first argument against independence. His second argument was that he believed common people were not capable of ruling. He argued that the colonists should obey British laws for their own good. He said that these laws came from God and made life safer and better for most colonists. The third reason against independence is Booker warned that working for independence was dangerous and would lead to a war with Great Britain. Such a war would hurt thousands of people far worse than living with a few unfair laws. Booker's loyalist sermons made some patriots angry, and they threatened to hurt him. Realizing that he was in danger, Booker began keeping loaded pistols nearby when he would give his sermons. All right, so Jonathan Booker was a religious leader in Maryland. He used his sermons to argue for the Loyalist cause. It's not very centered. The king's power, his arguments were that the king's power came from God, and disobeying the king's law was disobeying God. The colonists should obey British laws for their own good, and fighting for independence would lead to war and thousands of deaths. All right, now we're going to go to Lord Dunmore. I think it's Dunmore. All right. Governor of Virginia. John Murray was a fierce Loyalist leader whose British title was Lord Dunmore. He came from a noble Scottish family and was elected to the British Parliament in 1771. King George III appointed Dunmore to serve as a royal governor of Virginia. Dunmore was a proud and wealthy man who dressed in fancy clothes and showed off his wealth and importance. He was stubborn and sometimes bad tempered, and he was very loyal to Great Britain. Dunmore pointed out that Great Britain started the colonies and continued to protect them. Therefore, he felt it had the right to rule them and make them pay for taxes. Right, so that's the first argument. Dunmore also argued that fighting for independence would hurt the economy and make many colonists poor. He strongly believed that the colonists had a duty to obey British laws. The colonies, he said, must depend on Great Britain. A colonist who would not fight for the king was labeled as a traitor. As governor, Dunmore thought that being tough would frighten the colonists into accepting British rule. Instead, his firm actions angered many people in Virginia. Dunmore began to fear for his family's safety. In June 1775, he moved them on a British warship. He then gathered a number of warships and sent them to attack Patriots along the Elizabeth River. He promised to free any slaves owned by the rebels if the slaves fought against the Patriots. A number of enslaved Africans joined the fighting in order to gain their freedom. In the end, Dunmore's harsh actions only made the views of the Patriots more popular. Because of him, many who had been neutral began to think that they should fight for independence from Great Britain. All right, so Lord Dunmore was a governor of Virginia, and he was loyal to Great Britain. His arguments were that Great Britain started the colonies and protected them, and they had a right to rule and tax the colonies. The war for independence was not spelled correctly. The war for independence would hurt the economies, and many colonists would become poor. And the colonists had a duty to obey British laws or be a traitor. All right, so those were the viewpoints of loyalists. Now let's read the viewpoints of the patriots. Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was a popular and respected patriot. At first, he did not favor independence and hoped that Great Britain would start to treat the colonies more fairly. But when this did not happen, Franklin sided firmly with the Patriots. Franklin had many talents. He was a successful writer, printer, inventor, and scientist. He lived in the city of Philadelphia in a colony of Pennsylvania. There he helped to start a library, hospital, and a college. Although he was an important man, Franklin often dressed in plain suits. He sometimes wore spectacles and a little fur cap to keep his head warm in the winter. People liked and admired Franklin, who was knowledgeable, funny, and wise. He could stay calm when others grew angry. He was good at helping people to understand one another's ideas during arguments. These abilities made him a skilled statesman. He had a leading role in shaping American policy at home. He was also a key diplomat who represented American ideas in Europe. From 1757 to 1775, Franklin represented the point of view of the colonies in Great Britain. Patiently, he tried to persuade the British government to stop making laws that the colonists thought were unfair. He did help convince the government to repeal the Stamp Act, yet Great Britain continued to pass unfair laws. At last, Franklin went home and became a Patriot leader. Franklin favored independence for several reasons. He thought Great Britain would keep making unfair laws and believed that the colonists could no longer trust the British government. Finally, Franklin believed that the colonists could govern themselves. By 1775, he was ready to help them prove that he was right. All right, so let's go through and fill in our points about Benjamin Franklin. All right, so our points for Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin is a lot clearer. Was a writer, printer, inventor, scientist. His main occupation, though, as a patriot, was that he was a statesman and a diplomat. He represented American views in Europe. And he felt our arguments for independence was that Great Britain would continue to make unfair laws, the colonists could not trust the British government, and that the colonists could govern themselves. They were capable. So the exact opposite of the. All right. So Mary Otis Warren. Mary Otis Warren was a patriot with a pen. Patriot Mary Otis Warren was a Massachusetts writer and poet. Patriots shared their ideas at meetings in her home. Among those who attended were John Adams, Samuel Adams, and Mercy Mercy's husband, James. Some historians believe that the idea for the Committee of Correspondence was first discussed in her home. Warren was thin with dark eyes and dark hair. She was very religious and cautioned her friends against wearing the latest fashions, as she felt that doing so would offend God. Even when she was young, Mary loved reading, writing, and discussing politics. She became upset by Great Britain's harsh treatment of the colonies. She felt the taxes were too high. In both her writings and discussions, Warren made several arguments in favor for independence. She believed that British laws and taxes were unfair since families in the colonies had a hard time earning enough money to pay for expensive British goods. Therefore, the colonists would be better off with their own government. Warren also showed that women had a duty to speak out against Great Britain. And while she thought that women did not have the strength to fight on the battlefield, their minds could be quite powerful. She believed that women should have the same choices as men to get an education and take an active role in politics. Warren expressed her ideas through writing. Two of her plays clearly attacked loyalists, such as Thomas Hutchinson. Her writings helped to encourage many people in Massachusetts to become patriots. All right, so let's add her points. All right, so writer and poet Mercy Otis Warren. She used her writings and plays to speak out about the British government. She felt that British laws and taxes were too unfair and that British goods were too expensive. Technically, number 3 goes next, that the colonies would be better off with their own government and that women should have the same choices as men to get an education and have an active role in politics. All right, and next is Samuel Adams. All right, Samuel Adams was a leading patriot in Massachusetts. Adams believed that the British were harsh and unfair rules, so he called on the colonies to fight for their independence. Adams was always interested in politics. He went to Harvard University in Massachusetts. There, he wrote a paper on people's rights to fight against unfair government. Other local patriots saw him as a leader. By the mid 1760s, he was a full time politician. Adams was born into a wealthy Boston family, but he did not always manage his money wisely. When he began his life as a politician, his friends had to buy him a new suit, a wig, and other clothing many politicians wore at the time because he did not have enough money to buy them. Adam was devoted to politics. He was a dramatic speaker and persuasive writer. He was a master at using those talents to gain public support. His enemies called him a troublemaker. So that's his action taken. Adams argued for independence by writing newspaper articles. He also gave speeches and frequently spoke at town hall meetings. I guess that's also his the action he did. Adams believed the colonists should not have to pay high taxes on British goods. All right, so that's point 1. He also said it was unfair that the king chose governors for the colonies. All right. The colonists, he argued, should be able to elect their own governors. Adams also thought that the colonists should have the power to change their unfair laws. If Great Britain refused to give them power, they should become a separate country. In 1765, Adams helped to organize a group called the Sons of Liberty. The Sons were a secret group of patriots who encouraged colonists to disobey laws like the Stamp Act. In 1773, Adams and the Sons of Liberty organized the Boston Tea Party to protest British taxes on tea. Adams also helped to set up the Committee of Correspondence. These groups were created for the colonies, so the colonies could share ideas and information with one another. They also helped patriots share news and plans with one another. Patriots like Samuel Adams continued debating with Loyalists over whether or not the colonies should declare independence from Great Britain. Before long, these patriots were working day and night to help the colonies win their independence. All right, so our main points about Samuel Adams. He was a politician, writer, and speaker. He wrote newspaper articles and spoke at town hall meetings. Also, to squeeze in there, he was a Sons of Liberty organizer, or leader, you could say. You can even put main patriot leader. His arguments for independence were that the colonists should not have to pay high taxes on British goods, the colonists should elect their own governors, and the colonists should have powers to change unfair British laws. So those are the main points. We can see how different they are, pretty much the exact opposites of what the Loyalists were saying. So the next lesson we're going to do is talk about Patrick Henry and his speech in encouraging patriots to come to arms and fight, which starts with the American Revolution. All right, fifth grade. Have a great day.